Hi, I'm Matt Bancroft.
And I'm John Savage.
And we're here at the Science and Industry Museum in Manchester looking through items that relate to factory records from the Tony Wilson archive. And the first item we're looking at is this advert for band members to join the Durutti Column.
Do you think that's one of the earliest factory artifacts?
Yeah, it must be one of the earliest. It's got to be mid-70s, early 78?
The image was actually designed by a man called André Bertrand, and it was one of the images in the infamous Le Retour de la Colonne Durutti pamphlet, which was a pamphlet that was issued to students at Strasbourg University in 1966 and precipitated a student strike and a disturbance. And it was very significant in the situationist international iconography. So this is a very early example, number one, of factory graphics and artifacts pre-Peter Saville, and number two, Tony Wilson's obsession with the situationist international, which percolates through all these early artifacts.
So this is a piece of sandpaper from Naylor's glass paper manufacturers in Manchester, and this is a sample of sandpaper that Tony Wilson had obviously sourced and then kept, and the reason for that is the first Durutti Column album is wrapped, it has a sandpaper sleeve.
I mean, Tony, again, this is another example of situationist influence, where Tony was very influenced by a book by Guy Debord, who was the principal situationist theorist, and he'd published a book called Memoir, which had a sandpaper cover. And the idea was that the book and then the record would destroy everything around it. Which didn't really marry with the sound of the Durutti Column, which is rather sweet and rather melodic. What I like about it, what is interesting, is you've got Woodley, Manchester, Naylors, you've got that. And as an example of factory using local industry and local materials in their products. And in many ways, what this is about is factory as a whole, as a company, as an idea, as a brand, as a record company, recasting Manchester, enabling people to re-envision Manchester in terms of industry, moving away from heavy industry, cotton, actual production, into culture and media, and also eventually zoning and property. This is one of the very first artifacts from the Factory Club, if not the first. And was designed by Tony Wilson. One of the first things that the factory did was to hold factory nights at the Public Service Vehicles Club, also known as PSV, the Russell Club, in Hume. And there was a big demand for handbills and posters for those shows. But this is actually from September and is a very good example of Tony's situationist influence and also punk influence. You've got the montage, you've got the torn paper, you've got the idea of urban mapping in there, and it shows that these kind of graphics went hand in hand with Peter Saville's graphics, and obviously Peter Saville did the factory, the seed of factory graphics. The seed of the factory brand was Fac 1, which was for a factory show in June. This is from September, but Tony was still and other people, including myself and Linda Sterling, were still making these handbills and graphics for factory acts and for the club at this time.
Factory would put out press releases for new record releases on what at that point was a kind of new was a new label. This is one that again that continues that kind of punk collage and situationist aesthetic, married obviously slightly with Peter Saville's Factory Records, his Use Hearing Protection logo, which he took from the wall of Manchester Art College and used kind of throughout and became a real kind of signifying image for the early years of factory and continued post Hacienda and onwards as well. This is for a Certain Ratios all-night party, which is FAC 5. The sleeve was again designed by Peter Saville, but this promotional piece was done, I'm sure, by Tony Wilson.
Yeah,
It looks like
yeah.
a continuation of that aesthetic, doesn't it, really?
And it's on the terrible sort of yellowy green copy paper they had in Granada for Granada scripts. You can always tell it's Tony because of this paper and this colour, which I remember because I worked at Granada as well. This is the colour they do the scripts in.
Would he have been taking time off from the day job then to produce these things on Granada's
Absolutely,
time?
and he would be freely using their resources. So this is another a promotional handbill for FAC 6, which was the first orchestral manoeuvres in the dark single, Electricity. It's Tony Wilson's writing, it's obviously done by Tony, photocopied at Granada. And what I love about this, he says, oh, by the way, the pictures are old, Paul has short hair now. Because you weren't supposed to have long hair then. And that was the third factory record, the orchestral manoeuvres single.
I mean, it makes sense, but when you come to these things, we come to these items later on, and you see the sleeve of Electricity, which is so pure,
Yes.
black, printed in thermographic ink, done by Peter Saville, and then you see these kind of items that promote it. They're kind of at odds. It's kind of two aesthetics that are odds, but obviously they're both kind of relevant to the period, aren't they? This is a copy. Well, this is an envelope from Tony Wilson's archive that says a few different things, so we picked it for a few different reasons. Firstly, it is the kind of first official set of stationery produced by Peter Saville, of which there is an envelope, some comp slips, and kind of letter-headed paper. But we also really like it because it's been used and kept. We're assuming, well, it is being sent to Peter Saville, with Peter and then Darling in brackets, which is really nice. Over and above everything else, over profit and commerciality is the art of what they're doing, and it's very important to factory to produce these items and for them to, particularly for Peter Saville as well.
High spec.
To high spec, yeah, that they are beautiful things. So when you receive a letter from factory, or a bill, or whatever it would have been, it's sent in this kind of really beautifully designed envelope. Not just about the logo as well, but about the paper that's being used as well, and that runs through factory always, doesn't it, really?
Yes.
So this is another early handbill to announce releases on the factory label. You did this one, John, didn't you?
I did, and you know, it's really not very good. I'm slightly embarrassed. You can tell I did it in 2 minutes at Granada, because you've got the Granada paper again, that sort of yellowy, greeny script paper that they used. And it is actually quite interesting. I don't know where I got those shoes from, probably a 30s magazine, and it's just very basic. Begins with a certain ratio, so you can date it. All Night Party, which we've already discussed, that's out. FAC 6, Orchestral Manoeuvres, out now. FAC 9, The Factory Flick, No City Fun, going to be out in July. FAC 10, Joy Division, Unknown Pleasures, due in July. So this must have been June, I think, that this was done. And then it mentions FAC 11, Exodus, English Black Boys, FAC 12, The Doherty Column, Instrumental Album, in fact it was FAC 14. FAC 13, The Badge, FAC 14, Distractions, Pillow Talk, and FAC 15, LT-Fits. And of course, this didn't quite happen the way that it's on this handbill. And it says at the end, I was obviously in a situationist moment, it says, new commodities exclusively factioned for you. These are all you need. They are in the shops. Oh well. That would have been knocked up in 2 seconds at factory.
Yeah.
John, we need a handbill.
So factory would put out these newsletters and shareholders analyses on a fairly regular basis. I mean, there's quite a lot of them from these early years. I guess at some point they obviously stop, but in this early period, kind of pre-Hacienda. There's loads of them, and they're always really interesting. They always have a great sense of humour through them. They document what's going on, but even the way that they actually don't necessarily promote the success of things. They'll talk about things either being cancelled or something's changed, or we're still waiting for the sleeve, or we're still waiting for the band to sort it out, or even be quite derogatory about certain elements.
Tony would have typed this out.
Yeah.
And Tony obviously was a compulsive communicator and a very good communicator, a very effective communicator. And he was really Factory's PR as well as being one of the people who set it up. Rob Gretton tended to look after the music, particularly with Joy Division. And so Tony was very much the front man, and this would have been part of it. And then there's little asides in it. There's lots of bitching and lots of squabbling. P.S. Will Devo ever be hip again? That doesn't have anything to do with Factory, but it's a dialogue that he's seeking to create. I love these newsletters. I think they're really fun.